tired dreamer, you're safe here now. Let the worries of the day quietly drift away, like clouds across a calm night sky. Tonight we're taking a peaceful journey to a place where stories breathe softly through the wind. A place of olive trees, golden light, and ancient whispers, where mythology floats gently, like mist over mountain tops. Close your eyes and feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort as we travel back through time to ancient Greece, where the gods walked among mortals and magic, danced in every flower petal, every grain of sand, every drop of morning dew. Tonight's story is about transformation, about seasons changing, and about finding beauty even in the darkest places. It's the gentle tale of Persephone, the maiden of spring, whose journey would teach the world about the rhythm of life itself. In the time when the world was young and gods shaped the earth with their divine hands, there lived a goddess whose very presence could make flowers bloom and birds sing with joy. Her name was Persephone, and she was the daughter of Demeter, the great goddess of the harvest and all growing things. Persephone was like springtime itself, fresh, vibrant, and full of innocent wonder. Her hair caught the sunlight like spun gold, flowing in gentle waves down her back. Her eyes held the deep green of new leaves, sparkling with curiosity about the world around her. When she walked through meadows, wildflowers would push through the earth just to greet her feet. When she laughed, the sound was like wind chimes dancing in a gentle breeze. She lived with her mother Demeter in the most beautiful valley you could ever imagine. Rolling hills stretched endlessly, covered in emerald grass that swayed like ocean waves. Ancient olive trees dotted the landscape, their silver-green leaves whispering secrets to the wind. Streams of crystal-clear water wound through the valley like ribbons of light, reflecting the endless blue sky above. In this paradise, Persephone spent her days exploring, learning, and growing. She would wake each morning as the first rays of sunrise painted the sky in soft pastels, rose gold, lavender, and the palest yellow. The birds would greet her with their morning songs, and she would respond with her own melodious voice, creating a symphony that made the very flowers dance. Demeter watched her daughter with such love and pride. Together, they would tend to the gardens that fed all of humanity. Demeter would show Persephone how to coax the wheat to grow tall and golden, how to make the fruit trees heavy with sweet offerings, how to ensure that every creature had enough to eat. Under their combined care, the earth flourished like never before. "My dear daughter," Demeter would say, her voice warm as summer rain, "you have such a gift. Everything you touch blooms with life." And it was true. Persephone had an extraordinary connection to all living things. She could sense when a plant was thirsty, when a small animal was frightened, when the earth itself needed tending. She moved through the world with such gentleness, such grace, that even the shyest woodland creatures would come to her without fear. The nymphs of the forest adored her. These ethereal beings with their gossamer wings and voices like silver bells would gather around Persephone each afternoon to share stories and sing ancient songs. They would weave flowers into her hair and teach her the secret names of every star in the night sky. "Tell us about the world beyond the valley," they would whisper, their eyes bright with curiosity. But Persephone had never ventured far from her mother's protective embrace. The valley was her entire world, beautiful, safe, and filled with everything she had ever known. Sometimes, though, when she stood at the highest hill and looked toward the distant mountains, she felt a strange stirring in her heart, a whisper of something calling to her from beyond the horizon. One particularly peaceful afternoon, as golden sunlight filtered through the leaves and painted everything in warm honey tones, Persephone was gathering flowers in her favorite meadow. This was a special place where the most beautiful blooms grew in wild abundance. Roses climbed over ancient stone walls, their petals soft as silk. Jasmine filled the air with its intoxicating perfume. Violets carpeted the ground in purple and white, and tall stalks of lavender swayed gently in the breeze. She moved among the flowers like a dancer, her flowing white dress catching the light. In her arms, she gathered the most perfect blossoms, not to pick them cruelly, but to relocate them to places where they could grow even more beautifully. This was her gift, understanding what each living thing needed to thrive. As she knelt beside a patch of particularly lovely narcissus flowers, their white petals gleaming like stars, she heard something unusual, a sound that didn't belong to her peaceful world, a deep rumbling that seemed to come from far beneath the earth. At first, she thought it might be thunder, but the sky was perfectly clear, painted in the most serene shade of blue. The rumbling grew stronger, and she felt the ground beneath her feet begin to tremble ever so slightly. The flowers around her seemed to sense something too. They swayed not with the wind, but with an energy that felt different, ancient, powerful. The birds fell silent, and even the ever-present humming of bees ceased. Persephone stood slowly, her basket of flowers forgotten, and looked around the meadow with growing wonder rather than fear. For she was a goddess, after all, and her divine nature recognized that something significant was about to happen. The rumbling grew louder, and suddenly, in the very spot where she had been kneeling, the earth began to crack, not violently, but slowly, deliberately, as if some great force beneath was gently pushing upward. Golden light began to seep through the crack, warm and inviting, unlike anything she had ever seen. From this glowing fissure in the earth, the most extraordinary flower began to emerge. It was unlike any bloom in her extensive knowledge, larger than any earthly flower, with petals that seemed to be made of the deepest, richest purple she had ever witnessed. But this purple wasn't flat or ordinary. It held depths within depths, swirling with hints of midnight blue and silver, as if it contained entire galaxies within each petal. The flower grew taller and more magnificent by the moment, its stem strong and graceful, its leaves the color of emeralds touched with shadow. But most remarkable of all was its fragrance, not sweet like the flowers she knew, but complex and mysterious, carrying hints of precious stones, ancient earth, and something else, something that spoke of vast kingdoms and untold wonders. Persephone found herself drawn to this incredible bloom as if by invisible threads. She had always been curious, always eager to understand new forms of life, and this flower called to something deep within her divine nature. Each step closer brought new details into focus, the way the petals seemed to shimmer with their own inner light, the way the very air around it seemed to hum with potential. "How beautiful you are," she whispered to the flower, kneeling beside it. "I've never seen anything like you. What secrets do you hold?" As she reached out to gently touch one of the magnificent petals, the rumbling beneath the earth grew stronger. The crack widened and more golden light poured forth, warm and welcoming, but Persephone was so enchanted by the flower that she barely noticed. The moment her fingers brushed the velvet soft petal, everything changed. The crack in the earth opened wider still, and from its glowing depths emerged something that took her breath away, not with fear, but with awe. 4 magnificent horses appeared, but these were no ordinary steeds. They were creatures of shadow and starlight, their coats deep black, but gleaming with hints of purple and blue, like the night sky itself. Their eyes held the depth of centuries, and their manes flowed like liquid darkness touched with silver. Behind them came a chariot that seemed crafted from the very essence of night and precious metals. It gleamed with obsidian and gold, decorated with intricate patterns that seemed to move and shift in the strange, beautiful light, and driving this otherworldly chariot was a figure that made Persephone's divine heart skip with recognition of power that matched her own. He was tall and regal, with the bearing of one accustomed to command, yet his face held a gentleness that surprised her. His hair was dark as midnight, and his eyes were like pools of starlight, deep and mysterious, but not unkind. He wore robes that seemed woven from shadow and precious stones, and upon his head sat a crown that spoke of a realm vast and ancient. This was Hades, lord of the Underworld, ruler of the realm of shadows, and king of the precious metals that lay hidden in the earth's depths. But in this moment, as he looked upon Persephone with wonder and something that might have been love at first sight, he seemed less like the fearsome god of death that mortals whispered about, and more like someone who had been searching for something beautiful to bring light to his dark kingdom. "Forgive me, gentle goddess," he said, his voice deep and resonant, like distant thunder, but warm with genuine emotion. "I have watched you from afar, seen your kindness to all living things, witnessed the joy you bring to the world above. I have come to ask, would you consider visiting my realm, not as a prisoner, but as an honored guest, to see wonders that no surface dweller has ever beheld?" Persephone stood frozen, not with fear, but with amazement. This was so far beyond anything she had ever experienced. Her sheltered life in the beautiful valley had not prepared her for such an extraordinary encounter, yet something within her divine nature responded to the sincere respect in his voice, the careful way he had asked rather than demanded. "Your realm?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Underworld," Hades replied, and at her slightly widened eyes, he quickly continued, "I know what you have heard, but it is not the terrible place that stories make it seem. It is a kingdom of wonders, caverns filled with crystals that sing, underground lakes that reflect stars you cannot see from above, gardens of the most precious gems where flowers made of silver and gold bloom eternally." He gestured to the magical flower that had first caught her attention. "This bloom is from my realm. I brought it here hoping its beauty might intrigue you enough to accept my invitation. Everything in my kingdom is preserved forever, beautiful for all eternity. Nothing dies, nothing fades." The idea was both fascinating and overwhelming. Persephone had never been anywhere but her mother's valley. She had never seen anything beyond the familiar meadows and streams she had known all her life. The thought of an entire world existing beneath her feet, filled with wonders she couldn't even imagine, sparked something adventurous within her that she hadn't known existed. "But my mother," she began, thinking of Demeter, who would surely worry if she disappeared without explanation. "Would be told of your visit," Hades assured her gently. "I seek no deception, no trickery. I simply offer you the chance to see marvels beyond imagining, to experience a realm that exists in harmony with yours, but follows different laws, where beauty takes different forms." The 4 shadow horses stamped gently, their hooves ringing like distant music against the earth. The chariot waited, glowing with its own soft, inviting light, and Persephone found herself at the threshold of the greatest adventure of her young life. The afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows across the meadow, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear her mother calling her name for their evening meal together. This was the moment of choice, to return to the familiar, beloved safety of everything she had always known, or to step forward into mystery and discovery. Looking into Hades' eyes, she saw not the coldness she had expected from stories of the Lord of the Dead, but a loneliness that matched something she hadn't even realized existed within herself. He was offering her not just adventure, but the chance to bring joy to someone who had known little of it. "Just a visit?" she asked quietly. "Just a visit," he confirmed, extending his hand with the careful courtesy of one who truly respected her choice. "I give you my sacred word. You may return whenever you wish." Persephone looked once more toward the familiar hills where her mother waited, then back at the impossible chariot and the magical flower that had started this extraordinary encounter. Deep within her divine heart, she felt the stirring of something that had been waiting to awaken, the desire to explore, to grow, to understand the full scope of the world beyond her sheltered existence. Taking a deep breath that carried the scent of jasmine and the mysterious fragrance of the underworld flower, she placed her hand in Hades' outstretched palm. The touch was warm, reassuring, and as he helped her into the chariot, she felt not fear, but anticipation. The shadow horses turned in a graceful arc, and as they began to descend into the glowing opening in the earth, Persephone caught one last glimpse of her beloved meadow, now bathed in the golden light of approaching sunset. She didn't know that this journey would change not just her own life, but the very rhythm of the world itself. She didn't know that her mother's grief at her absence would bring the first winter to the earth, or that her own eventual joy in both worlds would create the eternal dance of seasons. All she knew, as the chariot carried her gently down through layers of earth that sparkled with precious stones and glowed with their own inner light, was that she was finally, truly, beginning to discover who she was meant to be. As the chariot descended deeper into the earth, carrying Persephone away from everything she had ever known, the world around her transformed in ways that defied all imagination. The golden light that had first emerged from the crack in the meadow grew stronger, warmer, more inviting with each passing moment. The walls of the passage they traveled through were not the dark, cold stone she might have expected, but something far more magical. They gleamed like polished marble shot through with veins of silver and gold, and embedded within them were countless gems that caught the chariot's light and threw it back in rainbow cascades, amethysts deep as twilight, emeralds green as her mother's wheat fields, sapphires blue as the summer sky she was leaving behind, all pulsing gently with their own inner radiance. "How beautiful," Persephone whispered, her voice filled with genuine wonder rather than fear. Hades smiled, the first truly relaxed expression she had seen cross his features. "Wait until you see the palace gardens," he said softly. Beauty takes so many forms when it is freed from the constraints of mortality. The shadow horses moved with perfect grace, their hooves making no sound now as they traversed what seemed to be pathways made of crystallized moonlight. The air grew warmer, not with the oppressive heat she might have expected from being so deep underground, but with a gentle, embracing warmth that felt like being wrapped in the softest silk. As they traveled deeper, Persephone began to hear something extraordinary. Music, but not like any earthly song. It seemed to come from the very walls themselves, a harmony so complex and beautiful that it made her divine heart swell with emotion. It was the song of the earth itself, she realized, the ancient melody that had been playing since the world was first formed, usually too deep and quiet for any being to hear. The stones sing, Hades explained, noticing her amazement. Down here, where time moves differently, you can hear the music that has always existed in the heart of all things. Each crystal, each precious metal, each grain of earth has its own note in the great symphony. They passed through vast caverns, where stalactites and stalagmites had formed natural cathedrals, their surfaces covered in crystals that chimed softly as gentle breezes moved through the underground spaces. In one enormous chamber, an underground lake stretched as far as the eye could see, its surface so perfectly still, it was like a mirror reflecting stars that seemed to shine from the cavern ceiling itself. Those aren't reflections, Hades said, following her gaze upward. Those are actual stars, the ones that shine for the underworld, invisible to those above. Every realm needs its own light. Persephone found herself leaning forward in wonder, trying to take in every incredible detail. Schools of fish made from living light swam through the star lake, their forms shifting between silver and gold and the deepest blue. Along the shores, she could see what looked like gardens. But as they drew closer, she gasped to realize that the flowers were crafted from precious gems, their petals carved from jade and rose quartz, their stems of silver, their leaves of the finest gold. They're magnificent, she breathed. But do they live? In their own way, Hades replied. Everything here exists eternally, unchanging but somehow still growing, still beautiful. Watch. As they passed one particularly stunning flower made of diamonds and sapphires, Hades gestured toward it, and to Persephone's amazement, the gem flower turned to follow their passage, its crystal petals catching and reflecting their light like a living thing responding to the sun. They respond to beauty, he explained, to kindness, to attention. In a realm where nothing dies, different forms of life emerge. The chariot continued its journey through wonder after wonder. They passed forests of trees whose trunks were carved from obsidian and whose leaves were thin sheets of silver that sang in harmonies as breezes touched them. They crossed bridges made of crystallized rainbows, spanning chasms that glowed with their own inner fire. In one remarkable valley, waterfalls of liquid light cascaded down walls of precious metals, pooling in basins that seemed to hold captured starlight. How long have you lived here alone? Persephone asked softly, beginning to understand the profound solitude that must have shaped this mysterious god. Since the beginning of time itself, Hades replied, his voice carrying centuries of quiet loneliness. I was given dominion over this realm when the world was divided among my brothers and myself. Zeus received the sky, Poseidon the seas, and I received everything beneath the earth, all the precious metals, all the gems, all the foundations, upon which the world above rests. It is a beautiful kingdom, but he paused, and Persephone heard in that silence all the words he couldn't quite speak, the longing for companionship, for someone to share the wonders he had carefully cultivated in his realm, for conversation and laughter, and the simple joy of showing someone else something beautiful. But lonely, she finished gently. Yes, he admitted, until I saw you in your mother's fields, bringing such joy to everything around you. I had forgotten that loneliness was something that could be eased. As they spoke, the chariot rounded a bend, and before them rose the most magnificent structure Persephone had ever imagined. The palace of Hades stretched across the horizon like a dream made manifest. Its walls were built from black marble, veined with gold, and its countless windows glowed with warm, welcoming light. Towers reached toward the cavern ceiling like elegant spears, each topped with flames that burned in colors she had never seen. Purple fire, green flames, silver light that danced like aurora. Gardens surrounded the palace, and as they drew nearer, Persephone could see that these were unlike the gem gardens they had passed. These held plants that seemed to be crafted from precious metals, but moved and swayed like living things. Roses of silver opened and closed their petals in slow, hypnotic rhythms. Vines of gold climbed trellises of platinum, their leaves rustling with musical chimes. Fountains sent arcs of liquid crystal into the air, where they hung suspended like jewelry before cascading down in slow, graceful patterns. "It's incredible," Persephone whispered, and she meant it completely. This wasn't the dark, frightening underworld of mortal stories. This was a realm of impossible beauty, crafted with love and attention over countless centuries. As the chariot came to a gentle stop before the palace's grand entrance, beings emerged to greet them, but not the terrifying creatures Persephone might have expected. Instead, she saw spirits of remarkable beauty, translucent and graceful, with faces that held wisdom and kindness. These were the noble souls who had earned their place in the most beautiful parts of the underworld, and they welcomed her with gentle smiles and respectful bows. "My lady Persephone," one of them said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We have prepared chambers for you, should you wish to rest after your journey." Hades helped her down from the chariot with the same careful courtesy he had shown throughout their trip. "You are completely free here," he said earnestly. "Explore wherever you wish, speak with whomever you choose, rest when you need to. This is your home for as long as you choose to stay." Over the days that followed, though time moved so differently in this realm that days seemed almost meaningless, Persephone discovered wonders beyond her wildest imagination. The palace was filled with libraries containing books written on pages of precious metals, their stories told in scripts that glowed with their own light. She found music rooms where instruments carved from crystal and gold played themselves, creating symphonies of indescribable beauty. In the gardens, she learned to tend the metal and gem plants, discovering that they responded to her touch just as her mother's earthly flowers had. Under her care, silver roses bloomed more brightly, golden vines grew more melodious, and crystal flowers turned their faces toward her like living things seeking the sun. Hades proved to be the most thoughtful of hosts. He showed her hidden chambers filled with rare books, secret gardens, where the most precious flowers bloomed in eternal spring, and pools where she could look up through the earth and see her mother's world above, watching the changing of day and night like looking through a window. I want you to never feel cut off from your realm, he explained. Both worlds are part of who you are. They would walk together through his kingdom, and Persephone began to see not the Lord of the dead that stories painted, but a god who had spent millennia learning to find beauty in permanence, wonder in the eternal, joy in the deep foundations of existence itself. His loneliness had not made him bitter, but rather had taught him to treasure every moment of companionship, every shared wonder, every gentle conversation. Tell me about the mortal souls, she asked one day as they stood in a garden where diamond flowers sang lullabies. They come to us weary from their earthly lives, Hades explained. Here they rest, they heal, they remember all the beauty they once knew. The good souls find peace and joy. The wise ones become counselors and teachers. The brave ones become guardians and guides. Death, you see, is not an ending. It's a transformation, a passage to a different kind of existence. Persephone began to understand that this realm was not separate from life, but part of its greater cycle. The precious metals that formed beautiful jewelry above came from here. The rich soil that helped her mother's plants grow was nourished by the deep minerals of this kingdom. Life above and eternal existence below were partners in a dance that kept the world in balance. But even as she marveled at these discoveries, she began to feel a tugging in her heart, homesickness for her mother's warm embrace, for the scent of mortal flowers, for the changing light of the sky she had known all her life. The underworld was beautiful, but it was eternal, unchanging. Part of her divine nature craved the cycles, the seasons, the constant small transformations that made life above so precious. Hades, with the sensitivity that had drawn her to trust him, noticed her growing wistfulness. You miss your mother, he said gently one evening as they sat beside a fountain of liquid starlight. I do, Persephone admitted. This realm is more beautiful than I ever dreamed possible. And you have been kinder to me than I had any right to expect. But part of me belongs above, just as part of me has come to belong here. Hades nodded slowly, understanding written in his star-deep eyes. I had hoped, but I would never keep you against your will. Your happiness matters more to me than my own desires. It was then that Persephone realized something that surprised her. She didn't want to leave forever, but she also couldn't stay forever. The young goddess who had descended into this realm had discovered things about herself she had never known. She had found strength, wisdom, and a love for both the eternal beauty of the underworld and the changing beauty of the world above. What if, she said slowly, the idea forming as she spoke, what if I didn't have to choose completely? What if there were a way to honor both realms, to bring them into harmony instead of separation? Hades looked at her with growing hope and wonder. What do you mean? I mean, Persephone said, her voice growing stronger with the certainty that I have learned something important here. Both worlds need each other. The earth above needs the deep foundations below. The changing seasons need the eternal springs. Life needs death, and death needs life. What if I could be a bridge between them? And so, with wisdom born from her journey into darkness and her discovery of light within it, Persephone proposed the solution that would become the rhythm of the world itself. She would spend part of each year in the underworld with Hades, bringing joy and companionship to the eternal realm, learning its deep mysteries, tending its immortal gardens, and part of each year she would return to her mother above, bringing with her the wisdom of the depths, the knowledge of how all things were connected, the understanding that death and life were partners in the great dance of existence. When she was below, the world above would rest. Her mother Demeter, in her grief at the separation, would allow the earth to sleep, creating the seasons of autumn and winter when the world prepared for renewal. When Persephone returned above, the world would celebrate. Spring and summer would bloom with joy at the reunion, and all living things would flourish. "It's perfect," Hades said softly. "You won't be leaving forever, just traveling between homes." "Between the homes of my heart," Persephone agreed. And so began the most beautiful rhythm the world had ever known. Persephone's choice to embrace both realms, to refuse to see them as opposing forces but rather as complementary aspects of existence, gave the earth its seasons and gave both worlds something precious: hope, cycle, renewal, and the deep joy that comes from reunion after separation. As she prepared for her first return to the surface, riding once again in the chariot of shadow horses, but this time with the promise of return, Persephone carried with her gifts from both realms: flowers that would bloom eternally in her mother's gardens, wisdom about the deep connections underlying all existence, and most importantly, the knowledge that true growth often comes from journeys into unknown territory. The crack in the earth opened once more, and golden light streamed down to welcome her home. But now she knew it wasn't just an ending to her adventure. It was part of an eternal cycle of departure and return, exploration and homecoming that would make both realms richer forever. And so, our story comes to its gentle close, dear dreamer. Like Persephone, may you rest peacefully knowing that every ending is also a beginning. Every separation contains the promise of reunion, and every journey into darkness can reveal new forms of light. Sleep now and dream of eternal gardens where crystal flowers sing lullabies, and wake refreshed, ready for your own adventures in the beautiful world above.